My friends, what you're about to see now is not just a simple internet meme that broke through the social media bubble, but it's a very serious, well-documented, unsparing warning coming straight from within the United States Homeland Security Committee about the future of Brazilian sovereignty. An image generated by artificial intelligence started circulating from the offices in Washington, showing the president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, wearing a gray sports sweatshirt. The exact outfit worn by the Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro on the day of his extradition, handcuffed and holding a bottle. The post made on the official social media of Congressman Carlos Gimenez, Republican representative from Florida, carried a lethal and direct warning: what awaits him. Yes, my friends, he sent the message. Don't make the mistake of looking at this post and thinking it's just a juvenile provocation. Carlos Gimenez is not an anonymous Twitter user. We're talking about a veteran congressman who serves on the Homeland Security Committee and is part of the Special Committee on International Relations, designed exclusively to stifle the influence of China and Russia in the Americas. And when a man with that level of access to Pentagon reports posts a picture of the head of state of Brazil as someone headed for prison, he's not just expressing an opinion. He's signaling a brutal shift in doctrine in Washington because the era of diplomatic patience is over. And it's exactly at this point of no return that our ultimate rule of geopolitics comes into play. A law that the current government pretends to ignore. The law of the drowning man's embrace. Pay attention, the law of the drowning embrace. Brazil no longer has strong, prosperous, and democratic allies. Cornered by internal rejection and the collapse of its partners, the cornered Brazilian government decided to cling to dictatorships that are already sinking under the weight of deadly sanctions, like Russia and Venezuela. The structural problem of geopolitics is mathematical. Whoever tries to cling to a collapsing regime in a drowning man's embrace does not save their ally. They are violently dragged to the bottom of the abyss along with them. And for you to understand how we got so quickly to the edge of this precipice, we need to unravel the internationalization of politics. No one says this, but Brazil's domestic politics are no longer decided only in Brasilia. We were dragged into an era where alliances are formed based on global ideological affinity. The state of Florida stopped being just a vacation destination and became the financial and political headquarters of the Latin American resistance. Miami is now home to the largest concentration of Cubans, Venezuelans, and thousands of Brazilian expatriates who fled the collapse caused by the far left in their home countries. And when Brazilian diplomacy chooses to provoke a gigantic center of power, it makes a basic ballistic miscalculation. See the destruction caused by the Planalto Palace in just months. First, the government formally rejects the new American ambassador appointed to Brazil, Mr. Daniel Perez, a diplomat rooted in Florida politics, leaving the embassy of the world's greatest military power practically headless. But ideological submission blinds them to strategy. At a recent rally overcome by delirious arrogance, President Lula attacked Secretary of State Marco Rubio by name, publicly calling him a frustrated Latin American. My friends, consider the impact of this insult. Marco Rubio is not a low-ranking politician. He is revered as one of the most feared voices in American foreign policy. By insulting Marco Rubio, the Brazilian government instantly alienated the hardcore of Washington's intelligence community and picked an open fight with the inexhaustible machine of Hispanic exiles. Brazil has cornered itself. After the crushing defeats of the left in Peru, in Chile, and the recent fall of Gustavo Petro in Colombia, the Brazilian ecosystem remained as the last and decadent stronghold in South America. It would be the last trench harboring the shadowy operations bleeding the continent. And this rope that Brazil uses to hang itself is woven with war technology and subservience. The real silent storm that underlies Carlos Gimenez's warning pulses on the industrial assembly lines. Because Brazil has just crossed the point of no return in the dangerous BRICS drone connection. In recent weeks, emissaries of Vladimir Putin proposed at the Nova Nos summit a vast civil cooperation among the BRICS for the manufacturing of unmanned autonomous systems. The facade is to produce agricultural drones. The reality is a cold mechanism designed to break the global stranglehold imposed on Moscow. The Russian war machine is exhausted. The drone manufacturing industrial complex in Yelabuga can no longer legally import Western microchips and flight controllers, which are essential to keep its fleet of kamikaze drones in the air. And how does the Kremlin's chess game circumvent the law? By dragging others down with it. Moscow lures partners so that, under the guise of scientific development, they import boards from the United States and lenses from Germany. Then, through triangulation routes, these parts are secretly shipped to Russia. And Brazil, yes, my friends, Brazil personified by meetings, totally surreal ones with former KGB directors like Nikolai Patrushev, walking freely through the laboratories of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, is putting itself in the shameful position of being a logistical facilitator of terror. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like the video. It takes a lot of work to bring this to you. And now visualize this scene clearly and face the harsh reality. A military microchip disguised as civilian parts, legally purchased on the New York market by a Brazilian branch. It's authorized to inspect cattle in the countryside of São Paulo, but it's secretly diverted. 8 weeks later, under the snow curtain of Eastern Europe and the sound of air raid sirens tearing through the dawn, this exact microchip with a Brazilian origin record works perfectly as the processing brain of a Russian kamikaze drone. The device tears through the skies and explodes brutally, ripping apart the floors of a civilian residential building in Kyiv. In the split second when the concrete collapses, the alarms of cyber intelligence and Washington's financial compliance flash red. The tracking of the smoldering wreckage identifies the root of the logistical fraud by the serial number. And it's at the moment that barcode is scanned that the Brazilian economy is placed on the global terrorism blacklist. The impact? The simultaneous blocking of international transactions through the SWIFT system. The flight of trillions of dollars and multinational corporations shutting their doors in the southeast and in the Manaus Free Trade Zone in the dead of night. Toying with supplying disguised technology to war criminals is not a diplomatic failure. It's like putting a loaded gun to the temple of the already weakened Brazilian economy. And before we move on to the shadows of the American Special Forces, a tactical warning for those of you following our protocol. If you understand the seriousness of what we're uncovering here and want to make sure our voice breaks through the establishment bubble, sponsor this channel. We depend on strong-minded people. Use the super thanks below or scan the Pix QR code that's showing on your screen right now. You can sponsor this video so it reaches millions of Brazilians. And it's in the midst of this diplomatic vacuum that a central tactical question gains strength in analysis and intelligence circles. Is it really possible for the United States to infiltrate highly camouflaged Delta Force squads into Brazil, exactly as they operated in the shadows of Venezuela? The hypothesis suggests that secret counterterrorism units could map out terrain and invade strongholds to capture and eliminate leaders of the Comando Vermelho and the PCC. The basis for this projection is strictly technical. The Trump administration's new policy doctrine reclassified these factions. They stopped being seen as a local public security problem and were elevated to the highest category of international terrorist organizations. It seems impossible that US boots on the ground could operate covertly on Latin American soil without asking for diplomatic permission, you wonder. Anyone who doubts the weight of this possibility ignores the lessons of military history itself. The American anti-terrorism law grants free rein for the use of lethal force abroad if agencies determine that the host state is protecting the enemy. Operation Just Cause, launched with overwhelming force in Panama in 1989 to depose the dictator Manuel Noriega, the head of state. Deeply involved with the cartel roots, it's a historical fact, undeniable and documented by the Pentagon. The capability for infiltration and extraterritorial extraction exists, and it has already been used on the continent. Now, recently they arrested Maduro and took him to the United States. On the other hand, to understand the whole board, we need to observe the coldness of Washington's operational procedures. The American war machine is devastating, but it is deeply methodical. The capture of Nicolas Maduro was not a random invasion of Marines kicking down doors in the jungle from one week to the next. It was the lethal epilogue of a massive criminal case that ran silently for more than 15 years in the files of the federal court in New York, conducted by the DEA. The ground tactical operation only materialized after the American justice system built an unquestionable stack of evidence, with thousands of pages, frozen accounts in tax havens, tracking of billions in money laundering, and corroborating testimonies from deserter generals. And for a military infiltration of this magnitude to happen today in Brazil, the operation would follow the exact same bureaucratic playbook. The Pentagon and the State Department would first need to undermine the global legitimacy of the target nation, officially turning it into a pariah state. The exact process of institutional bleeding that Venezuela suffered after criminal electoral fraud. Brazil, whether we like it or not, is still seen by Washington as a vast sovereign nation. Therefore, if such an operation were on the Brazilian horizon, it wouldn't start with helicopters landing on the hills of Rio de Janeiro. It would start within intelligence circles with relentless tracking of financial data, undeniably proving the merger between the political leadership and the money laundering structure of the factions, followed by the country's severe economic isolation. The American stealth military intervention is real, but it is always the last and irreversible gear in the long process of institutional suffocation. However, we can't be naive and forget the most relentless factor in this geopolitical equation: time. Donald Trump doesn't have 15 years to sit, watch, and wait for the bureaucracy to calmly build a legal case, while Lula turns Brazil into the private backyard of China and Russia. And if you analyze it even more deeply and coldly, this is already happening, right now, but pay attention to the brutal logic of the chessboard. What would be the strategic point for Washington to sweep away Cuba's dictatorial influence, crush the Chavista regime in Venezuela, and regain diplomatic control of Colombia? Just to allow all the autocratic trash of the hemisphere to freely pile up in Brazil? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Brazil is by far the most valuable, rich, and strategic asset that the United States needs to secure in order to shield its sphere of influence in the Americas. And the Trump administration has only 2 more years in office to consolidate this continental cleanup. What American diplomacy used to take 20 years to accomplish in the past is now being carried out lethally in just 4 years. And why, you ask? Because the ultimate goal, the big checkmate at the end of Washington's game, is not South America. The goal is to have the Americas as a completely clean, secure, and aligned continental rear base to face the ultimate global confrontation against China. That's why, my friends, don't be fooled. The weapons that will be used to bring Brasilia into line won't be American Navy aircraft carriers anchored off the coast of Rio de Janeiro tomorrow morning. The guillotine that's coming down is much quieter and 1,000 times more devastating. Political asphyxiation and the economic tourniquet. If the United States decides to press the compliance global red button and really apply the economic tourniquet, restricting Brazil's access to the dollar market, cutting international lines of credit, and sanctioning exports, the outcome won't be a military conflict. The Brazilian system itself will spit the president out. This is serious and reveals the fragility of the left. The current model of power in Brazil has always depended on the absolute connivance of the establishment to control the country. They govern because the mega banks, the big businessmen, the political bosses of the Centro, the arts establishment, and the leaders of the judiciary allow it and profit from it. This alliance has no ideology. It has financial spreadsheets. The very moment the American squeeze makes the banks start to bleed cash. And national giants that depend on the global market, like JBS, Embraer, and the agribusiness powerhouses, start losing billions of dollars on the stock market. Because they're tied to a pariah government, institutional loyalty ends right then and there. If the choice is between sinking together with Lula or saving their own profits and siding with the United States, the president will be thrown under the bus by his own allies without hesitation. The fall of a government under American pressure never comes from the outside in. It comes from the very system that devours its own leaders to survive Washington's guillotine. Did you get the message? Of course we're not ruling anything out. Of course we're not. Did you get the message? We're not ruling out targeted military operations at the borders here. That's likely to happen in the coming months. And we're not ruling out, who knows, the arrest of Molusco either. But that other possibility would be more plausible and faster to implement without the problem of public opinion inside the United States. If you think more Brazilians should see this analysis, sponsor this video. The information is on the screen. Now, the big ominous question is, why does the Brazilian government seem to deliberately encourage this suicidal fight against the greatest military force on the planet? For what rational reason would Brazil flirt with embargoes and irritate the belligerent Republicans from Florida? The answer lies at the bottom of the well of autocratic despair. When the system realizes it's in a management collapse, with inflation breaking promises, coffers depleted, and the new right advancing across the continent, the socialist playbook says there's only one panic button. The only way out is to artificially manufacture, through provocation, an external oppressor and imperialist enemy. Intelligence calls this a false flag. A false flag for geopolitical purposes. The government's inner circle pushes the limits against the Americans, hoping for a rupture. Just like Nicolas Maduro did in Venezuela, and just like Petro did in the last few months before losing the elections. They insult senators and embrace former KGB agents in the hope that the United States instinctively will respond in kind with draconian sanctions. And when the retaliation from the American population crushes the Brazilian economy, the executive branch will use this as a historical pretext. See? They destroyed our sovereignty. That's what Lula shouts 24 hours a day on social media. Leaders will cry on national networks that our sacred sovereignty is under cowardly interventionist attack from Washington. It's the Machiavellian scheme tested in the squares of Havana and Caracas. And if the system convinces the judiciary that there is a lethal foreign force trying to sabotage the country, they get the constitutional master key, the supreme blank check to declare a state of emergency, cancel civil liberties, ban social networks once and for all, as the nation's first lady is already loudly demanding. All of this is to muzzle the opposition. Now pay extra close attention because we are operating on borrowed ground. The system monitors the narratives that expose this macabre engineering and will do everything to pull our plug. That's why we don't act without military redundancy. Subscribe immediately to our Bunker Reserva. The channel is called Blinde a Sua Mente. Yes, and the QR code is on the screen. The secure link is in the description and in the pinned comment. We won't leave any room for error. We've created our backup channel. If they delete this one, we'll meet there. So subscribe now. Get out of the danger zone and secure your access before the cold, dark screen of absolute censorship tries to suffocate us. And all this subservience to Russia and all the mockery toward the United States are not technical mistakes due to old age. They are parts of a plan to create the paralyzing chaos needed to prevent democratic transfers of power. But they underestimated the renewed American appetite to root out enemy infiltration on the continent. The image of the dictator in handcuffs and a sweatshirt is a warning that Washington has stopped showing restraint. The image of the dictator in handcuffs and a sweatshirt is a warning that Washington has stopped showing restraint. The time has come for you to stake out your verdict on the board. Go down to our comments section right now and leave your mark. Show that our squad doesn't swallow poisoned narratives. Type our keywords with the precision of a fighter. Diplomatic vassalage and end of an era. Diplomatic vassalage and end of an era. Right now. Why in ruthless geopolitics does anyone who insists on embracing the doomed seal their own end forever? Prepare your mind. Shielding is strategic. The law of survival that dictates the fall of presidents is exactly the same one that operates silently in your market. In a tightening crisis and economic clampdown, the system always consumes those without their own authority. If the system or your career always depends on the goodwill of others, on biased algorithms, on casual recommendations or favors, you will be the first to be thrown under the bus. In the free market, invisibility is the worst of all sanctions, and the most valuable currency, more than gold or oil, is people's attention. And what destroys the soul of an elite professional is knowing that you deliver the best results, but you keep operating in the shadows, locked inside a bubble. And meanwhile, shallow competitors who dominate the narrative and the projection of power make money and set the rules. And you need to stop being a hostage to the system and become the uncontested authority in your niche. Building this level of visibility requires narrative intelligence and relentless tactical distribution. With 50 million monthly views on my social networks monetized in dollars, our protocol has been validated on the digital battlefield. Your authority cannot be outsourced. The owner has to take the lead, and those who have done this are making much more money. And it's to help you break through the bubble that holds you back, the obstacle that keeps you invisible on social media, that I've prepared an immersive workshop next Sunday, August 16th. 100% in person here with me in my studio in Curitiba. But I will be absolutely blunt about reality. The operation is limited to only 10 seats and there are exactly 2 spots left. When they are filled, the steel door comes down for good and that's it. QR code on the screen, the secure link is in the description and in the first pinned comment. Don't miss the opportunity to meet Shimon Oliveira face to face. Where am I going to show you how I do it? I've reached over 1.3 million followers and subscribers on social media and get more than 50 million views every month again here on social media. Don't miss this opportunity. Now I want to give you a valuable tip about a fantastic series that premiered on our channel with series and movie recommendations. Content without whining, without woke culture, so you can choose the title and enjoy it with your family. Link in the description, in the pinned comment and in the card. From a series that is precisely about the confrontation between Russia and Ukraine and how much China has infiltrated the United States and Latin America. Yes, my friends, it's fantastic. I'll be waiting for you on our series and movies channel. And once again, do you want to sponsor this content, this video, so it can reach millions of Brazilians and open the eyes of our nation? The link and the information are here in the card. Just click, point to the QR code and use the number that appears on your screen. Now subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell and leave your like on the video. You can become an exclusive member and get early access to our content. The most important moment, now blinde a sua mente. Yes, blinde a sua mente. I'm Shimon Oliveira and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.